Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson, and joining me today is my new friend, Lori, and we are talking. She's written a lot, but she has a new book out that I think people are going to enjoy. Chasing Bruce. So, first off, welcome to the podcast, Lori. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hey, Jesse, thank you for having me. Yeah, I did just publish this book called Chasing Bruce recently, and it's been a really fun ride so far. But to that a little while, I grew up in Freehold, New Jersey, which, as most of your listeners probably know, is where Bruce grew up too. And I'm about 10 years younger than he is. So when I was a teenager, around 14, this is the first time I heard Born to Run on the radio. And I soon found out that Bruce was from Freehold. And from that point on, it became this obsession. I grew up in Jersey and lived here for about 30 years. And then I moved to Maryland and then to California for about 20 years. I just moved back to the Jersey Shore 2 years ago. And I now live about just a 10-minute walk down the boardwalk from Asbury Park, where all the things have happened. So it's been a really interesting kind of coming back here and then publishing this book in this area. Everybody around here has Bruce stories. I've really enjoyed reconnecting with my roots back here in Jersey and connecting with other fans and the local music scene. And it's just been, everything's come full circle. And like the picture on the cover of the book was taken right outside the Stone Pony. And I'll tell you that story a little bit later. But just the fact that now I live right down the street from there is interesting. So yeah, music's been a big part of my life for a long time. And it's been a way to connect with other people, to make friends through music, connecting with the community. There's a really huge music community around here. And so yeah, it's been a fun ride.
I love that. And we are going to get to your Bruce story, and we're going to get to the story about the book and some of your other writing as well. But I always like to start at the beginning. So, you talked about growing up in Freehold. When do you first remember Bruce, and what about his music spoke to you? It's like asking, when did you find out your parents used Tide laundry detergent? It's just always been there. So before we get to Bruce, talk about growing up. What kind of other music was your family listening to?
Yeah, it's funny. My parents, I wouldn't say they were really big into music in general,
Okay.
but they had the typical Frank Sinatra, Johnny Ray, I guess, the big band music, that kind of stuff. When they did play music, that's what they were playing. But when I was a teenager, I was into like America was, I think, the first album that I like memorized all the words to
Okay.
all the songs. And typical Elton John and Billy Joel, John Denver, like singer-songwriter
Yeah.
thing. And yeah, and it's funny, my brother, who's 2 years older than me, we were, I would say, not that close when we were young. We were at each other. But when we became old enough to go out to bars and hear music, that was a way for us to connect. So again, music made an important connection for me with my brother when we were at that age.
I got to thinking, I graduated high school in 77. So we are a couple years apart from each other. So it sounds like I might be the same age as your brother.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I was born in 59.
Yes.
So my sister is 5 years younger than I am, and my brother is 5 years younger than her. We were certainly friendly, but we have since become, as adults, much more close. I'm going to tell a story and then I want to hear your story.
Okay.
So I'm in Moss Bluff, Louisiana, which is a suburb of Lake Charles, Louisiana, is where after my parents divorced and my mom settled down and I was at a barber shop and there was, I can't remember if it was Time or Newsweek, but it was one of those famous covers. And I remember it was the one that talked about what a big rock star, right? I listened, a clock radio was my first window to music because my parents controlled the car radio, they charged the stereo, but when you had your little clock radio in your room, you could listen to whatever you wanted. And for those of you who are listening audio, Laura's nodding her head with understanding. So I remember thinking, who is this? Have these people never heard of Elton John? And I just had this disdain, right? I did not discover Bruce till 1980. I was dating Linda, who's now my wife, and her friend Lisa Mesh had gone to school in the East Coast. And she came back talking about this Bruce Springsteen guy.
Uh-huh.
It was amazing. And then Hungry Heart came out and people were. So you had a little different experience seeing the magazines.
Are you referring to the first time I met him?
You talked about not only hearing Born to Run, but you remember seeing the magazine, right?
It was really more about the first time I heard him also was on the clock radio,
Okay.
but it was FM.
Oh, very nice.
And it was WNEW FM, which was a big radio station out of New York, I believe. I can't be 100% sure of that, but I'm pretty sure. But anyway, I heard Born to Run, and I don't know why I remember hearing that song.
Right.
And later that week, I was in school, and one of my friends, I went to her house, and her sister was playing the Born to Run album. And that's when I first became aware of Bruce after they played the song on the radio and they said, oh, that's Bruce Springsteen from Freehold, New Jersey. And that kind of my ears perked up. I'm like, what? There's somebody famous from Freehold. Like, I live here. Like that, nothing ever happens in Freehold.
Yeah.
So that was my first becoming aware of Bruce and then hearing the album. And then we listened to the album. And as far as the covers on the magazine, I think I talked about that a little bit later. It was more about like, the posters and connecting
Yes.
to like the first time I saw him in person.
Please.
Okay, we were at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And my friend and I were there, and this one of the guys that was at the bar, he's, oh, Bruce is at the fast lane. Because one of our friends looked like Springsteen, and we used to pretend, oh, it's Bruce, just to play around with other people that didn't know
Sure.
it wasn't him. So this guy was like, that's not Bruce. Bruce is at the Fast Lane, which is another bar down the street. So my friend and I were like looking at each other, okay, let's go see if he's there. So we run down to the Fast Lane and we get there, and it's again 2 o'clock in the morning, but we figured let's go in anyway and check it out. And the bouncer let us in for free, even though there was a $2 cover charge. We didn't have any money. So we walk into the bar and we're looking around and there's hardly anybody there. And we figure, oh, he must have left. And then we look over at the bar across the room and there he is sitting there having a beer. So as far as the magazines and the posters, like I had the posters on my wall and I had the magazines, and now here he is in person. So that was a little bit, I just was starstruck. I didn't know what to do. I was just standing there. And the next thing you know, he gets up to leave. And we're standing between the bar and the door, the exit door. So he starts walking towards us and I'm like, oh my God, he's going to come over and say hi or something. And then I realized he has to walk by us to leave. I stood there and I froze for a minute. What do you say? What do you do? But the next thing I know, he's approaching me and all of a sudden I blurt out, can I have a kiss? I'm like 18 years old and I guess he was about 28 at the time. So, he stopped and he looked at me and there was like this moment of fantasy in my head of, oh, we're going to fall in love and tour the world together and all this stuff. And anyway, in the next second, like he leans down and I thought he's going to give me a kiss, but he turned his head at the last second to put his cheek out so I could kiss him on the cheek. And I did. And then he kept walking and he left. And I just stood there numb, like I couldn't believe it. I kissed Bruce Springsteen.
So Lori, at the time, you couldn't put in words maybe why that song spoke to you and why his music spoke to you. But as you're now 30, 40 years of fandom, can you articulate maybe going back and why that music spoke to young Lori?
I've thought about that as I was writing this book. And people have asked me that question before. And I think there was a couple of things. One is he sang about the Thunder Road, like we're pulling out of here to win.
Sure.
And there was part of me that he was singing about the same place where I lived. That's where he lived.
Hmm.
So I felt this connection to the songs in that way, just because I knew everything he was singing about. I knew the roads and the circuit and Asbury Park and all these things I was very familiar with. And then being a teenager, I was a very romantic young girl and thinking about boys all the time. And he sang about love, right? He sang about romance. So I wrote down a couple lyrics, right? The amusement park rises bold and stark, like born to run. Kids are huddled on the beach in the mist. I want to die with you, Wendy, on the street tonight, and an everlasting kiss. Come on. And then a bunch of other songs on that album. She's the one. Her long hair falling, her eyes shine like the midnight sun. She's the one. Like, oh, I want to be that girl. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
I love that. So one of the things that there are so many different circumstances that affect that number, where you grew up, what your age was, what your financial status was. But I don't need to ask, you are someone who counts. Do you want to share the number?
It's funny you say that.
Really?
No, it's funny because I do save things though.
Okay.
And that's how I know I have an approximate number of how many shows I've seen because I have almost every single concert ticket from the day when you had tickets. And for some reason, I saved not just Springsteen, but all the concerts I'd gone to when I was younger. So, as far as Springsteen goes, from what I could tell, based on the ticket stubs that I have, then when we didn't have ticket stubs anymore, I looked at my receipts from Ticketmaster and all that. And I came up with a number. It's around 50, between 50 and 60.
Very nice.
All of those, a lot of those are concerts, but there are a handful of seeing him and playing in the local bars.
I also think it's interesting how people each do their own thing. So I don't count that because that's not a show. Do I count Bruce on Broadway as a show, a concert?
Yeah.
I just think there's a little bit of nerd in all of us that have the different thing. I remember I was at the second MetLife show back in 2016. And there was this whole debate on the longest show. It happened that summer and all this other stuff. And they got this whole minutia about when do you start the clock, right? Is it when he walks on stage? Is it when you first hear him, good evening? If he sings 3 hours and 59 minutes, I'm calling it 4 hours.
That's so funny. So that's very interesting to hear that people are so particular about.
And I guess as they were explaining to me, because so many of these early shows, you only had audio. So you
Right.
could only start the clock when you heard his voice,
Right.
not when he walked on. And I was it made me smile because there was this whole, it was a good-natured debate. Yeah. So let's talk about some of your other writing. Did you know you wanted to write early?
Actually, yes, I was a big reader and I always kept a diary. Now I call it a journal.
Right.
But I was always writing back in high school. It started. And I can't say that I really wrote a lot of stories or poetry or anything. It was more just keeping a journal of my life. But then when I guess when I first had kids is when I got take it a little more serious, not even seriously, but I joined a poetry group and we met once a month and I started writing poetry. And some of the poems I sent to some publishers because I thought they would be good children's books. And I got rejected. And then 30 years later, which was just a few years ago, I published those poems as children's books myself. So I have three children's books on Amazon. They're like easy reader for 3-year olds, 4-year olds, 5-year olds, whatever. And my friend illustrated them. So that was like the beginning of being more of a writer, calling myself a writer. I published another book, which was a story about my grandparents and my mother surviving the Holocaust. My grandmother had done a 6-hour interview with a Shoah Foundation, and I transcribed those 6-hour interviews and turned it into a book. And I published that last year. It's called Hilda's Story. And then living in Asbury Park, and actually it was right around the See Here Now festival last summer, when Bruce was the headliner. And that's a 3-day festival, Yeah, 3-day festival here in Asbury every year. And I was talking to people about the concert, and I was like, I have all these crazy stories, and I was starting to tell them the stories, and they're like, oh, you should write a book. You should write a book. And that's how the stories turned into a book for Chasing Bruce. And I decided to solicit stories from other fans. So I put the word out on social media, and if anybody wanted to submit a story, to do that. And so I got 6 people to submit a story about their relationship with Springsteen. And that was just such a fun experience to connect with other fans and hear how Bruce impacted their lives in different ways and how passionate they were about sharing their stories. To me, it's really, this whole thing is all about community. It's about connection with other people, with the music, community around Springsteen and around anything really, but just community in general.
I absolutely agree with it. I knew that I wanted to do this podcast. And so when I started it, and the guy who was running our network at the time told his wife, I think we'll get a season out of it, which is 12 episodes. And I ended up just falling in love with hearing people's stories
Right.
about and Bruce and his music, and I've expanded to other musicians, but this way that music has been such an important part of our lives. I'd love to hear a little bit more when you heard the stories and you talked about your grandmother. What was the motivation to get that into a book form?
About my grandmother?
Yes,
Oh, many reasons. One was just to, because even though the audio files are available to listen to online,
sure,
as well as videos on YouTube of her telling these stories, they're very scattered. She goes into a lot of detail about what happened in Germany and in Poland where they were and how close they came to death a number of times and starvation and all the things horrific. But it's hard to listen to those stories from her because she's got broken English a little bit and she goes off on a tangent and you can't keep
sure.
track of what was going on when. When I edited the interviews, when I transcribed them and edited them, I made it more succinct and more easier to follow. And I wanted it to be available to my family. That's really how I did it in the first place, was for my family as a tribute to my grandparents and to my mother. And so that was my initial motivation, to pass it down to my kids. So then, of course, because I put things on Amazon, I'm self-published. I put it out there and started publicizing it a little bit. And so many people were interested in hearing about the stories of my grandmother. People didn't know a lot of the things that happened in Nazi Germany that weren't Jewish, because they know me and then they read the book, it was like it became more personal for them and they were very moved by it.
Yeah, I love that because politically there's a lot of scariness going on. When Bruce is speaking up for it, and I'm going to talk to you about that in a little bit, but I think it's important to capture those stories and
Yes.
to share it. I was talking to someone about their writing. They were not a Bruce fan, but they were talking about that they started writing these stories because they wanted their children to be able to read them. And I said, that's how Bruce's autobiography started, is he was writing up the Super Bowl and he got to thinking there might be a time when his kids might want to know his story. So good for you. I'm glad. Now, remind me the name of the book again.
Hilda's story,
Okay,
and the subtitle is Surviving the Holocaust
very
on
nice.
Amazon.
Yeah. I take it you were at sea now, right? You were at the festival.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I have to say, definitely in the top 5 for
Okay.
sure. It wasn't just the show, him and singing and his performance, but being in Asbury Park on the beach and just across the street from the Stone Pony and down the road from where he wrote so many songs. Like that whole kind of atmosphere and being in that space and place, that just made it such a deeper level of being amazing.
Yeah, Mark and his wife had flown to go to that show. Then they came to Dallas to see a Dallas Cowboy show, even though Mark lives in the UK, he's a huge Dallas Cowboy fan. And then flew back to New York and got to see the Cowboys on a Thursday game as well. So he and I had dinner with his lovely bride, and he said that he would trade almost any other shows. If that was the only show he could see, he would be okay with it because the idea of that atmosphere, the energy, Bruce going, like when they're doing their shtick about, do you want to go home? Like, you on the beach. Do you want to go home? He said it was, and I've heard the audio, and it does seem like it was a, even though Lonesome Day starts out and Mark said he was a little, and then all of a sudden it just everything you could want just happened.
Yep.
So, yeah.
It was very special. And I got pretty close to the front, and there was
Okay.
a lot of people there. And
Yeah.
I was with my cousin, and I had just gotten the ticket really a few weeks before,
Yeah.
believe it or not. But then my friend convinced me to buy a ticket. And then my cousin, who lives about an hour away, had never seen Springsteen.
Okay.
And so she came down and she got a ticket that day, actually, just 2 hours before he came on stage. Somehow
Wow.
she got a wristband. And so she came in and we just snuck our way closer and closer to the stage. And I wanted to keep going. We were like practically stepping on people because it was so packed. And
Yeah.
she's, I think I'm good right here. And we were pretty close. But anyway, it was, so that was really special as well to see a show in Asbury Park with my cousin who had never seen him perform live. So made it
And
extra special.
it made for a nice little exclamation point on your story, as
Yes.
I was reading it. I love it. All right, so I'm going to try not to be judgmental in my voice, Lori, but there were some stories you shared that do not put you in the best light as far as the pit. Do you want to share a little bit, Lori, about how you may, I think it's past, you can no longer be convicted, right? Do you want to share a little bit of that, young lady?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Now, yeah, I am a rule breaker. What can I say?
Yes.
If you hadn't figured that out yet. And most of the time when we ended up in the pit, it wasn't by breaking the rules, but this one time we had a plan to make fake wristbands. Now they're very fancy and you can't really replicate the wristbands anymore. But this was back, I don't know what year it was, but they were pretty simple. So I brought a package of markers with me and we had some tape and then we had tickets for the floor, but we didn't get into the pit. So then we went to dinner and the napkin rings at the restaurant were made out of paper, white paper, perfect size to make a wristband. So we took those, which they were being thrown out anyway. So I wasn't really stealing, but
No, of course not.
so we went to the concert and then we had to figure out what the wristbands look like so we could try to replicate them. And we found out they were yellow, neon yellow, and then they just said BS and ESB in black on them. And so I was like, okay, we got it. So I look in my bag, I dig through my pile of markers, and what color I don't have is neon yellow. Of course. So then we're like, okay, now what do we do? And Patty notices this guy's sitting near us on the floor behind the pit, right? And this one guy, believe it or not, I have no idea to this day why, but he has a yellow highlighter in his pocket. So we tried to strike up a conversation. They weren't interested in talking to us, but I just asked him, can I borrow your highlighter? He didn't even blink an eye. He gives it to me. So I make the wristbands like inside my backpack so nobody could see sneakily. And we tape them on our wrists. And I used masking tape. She used Scotch tape. Just, we didn't really think about it too much. And we got in. We almost didn't because the guy was checking the wristbands and he tugged on them. We didn't know they were doing that. And so we got up there and he tugs on them to check and make sure they're real. Mine passed. Hers fell off. Patty, she was behind me. Now,
Yeah.
Patty, by the way, she's my Springsteen buddy from college. She was a Rolling Stones fan. I was a Springsteen fan. She was in the room next to me. She's been to more concerts than I have.
The student has become the master.
Correct. So she's been with me through a lot of these concerts and a lot of these crazy times when we ended up getting in the pit. And so that's what happened. And she just told me to keep, because I turned around and saw that her wristband had fallen off. And she said, keep going. And I ran into the pit because it was dark and the bouncers couldn't see, the security couldn't see us. And then she followed me in. And that was that.
Yes, I love that story. I was reading it last night and I was giggling at the sighting. One of my best friends, Sam, says that by heart he said we were at a small venue, Sam was, and he wants to be elbows on the stage every show he goes to if he can. I'm
Oh,
old and like a chair, right?
no, I need
So,
to hang out with Sam.
yes, exactly. You and Sam would fit in perfectly, except so these guys were putting their beers on the stage, right?
Oh,
Because the band hadn't started yet. And someone came by and said, "Excuse me, you can't do that. Please pick them up." So they picked them up, and the guy walks away and then immediately set him down. And
uh-huh.
Sam said it took everything he had not to go, "Excuse me, sir, they put their drinks down. They put their drinks down." So
Oh, that's so funny.
that is hilarious. So I don't want you to tell all the stories from the book because I want people to read it. It is a wonderful story, but I do, I have a 36-year-old adult son,
Okay.
and we are very close now. Like most teenagers, we went through a spell where he couldn't stand me and I couldn't stand him, but
Oh.
we've gotten past that. The story about you going to a show last minute because you were torn between your love of Bruce Springsteen and your love slash responsibility of being a mom, if you don't mind telling that story.
I was living in Maryland at the time and I was working in DC, and I had been to the Oakland concert in California just 2 weeks prior. I will say that I ended up having a long conversation with one of the guys who's in charge of security. Now I'm in DC. I go to work. I didn't have a ticket to see the show in DC that night, but I wanted to just swing by where the show was and just check out the scene. So I go over there and I walk by and I see the guy in charge of security.
Yeah,
I won't say his name because I don't want to get him in trouble, even though
right.
the chances, because I'm not sure he did what was allowed. But
Yeah,
I said hello, and he's, oh, do you have a ticket for the show? And I'm like, no, I don't have a ticket, but I just figured I'd come by and say hi or to see what was going on. And he's, if you want a ticket, I can sell you a pit ticket for $100, and I'll also give you a seat. No, he's selling me a seat ticket, a really good seat ticket for $100. And he goes, I'll also give you a wristband in case you want to go into the pit, but you can't enter the pit area until after they let everybody else in, right? Which is fair.
yeah, sure.
I was like, okay, great. But I had to go home and cook dinner for my kids. And
Right.
I called my family. I called my son, Kevin, and I said, he was, I don't know, 12 at the time, maybe. I said, hey, and I explained to him what was going on. And he's, Mom, I go, I should come home and make you guys dinner. He's like, Mom, you love Bruce. You have to go to the concert. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did. And I got my seat ticket. I got my pit ticket.
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's time to go inside, and I show my ticket and I go in and I walk right to the steps and I look down into the bottom of the arena to see what was going on down there in the pit. Nobody had come in yet. So they let us in, us that had seat tickets, before they let in the pit people, which is strange because usually they're in like an
Yeah.
hour before. So I run down the stairs and I show my wristband to the whatever. And I notice across the other side of the floor, that's where they're letting in the pit people.
Yeah.
I'm in a different entrance. And I'm like, oh my God. So I just casually walked down and I ended up walking right up to the front, and I got right up to the stage right before everybody else did that had been waiting all day to get into the pit. So I just, again, complete luck and opportunity. And I had to think on my feet and get down there. And yeah, that was amazing.
What did writing the book teach you?
It did, because when I started writing the book, it was really about just collecting the stories, documenting the stories, writing them down, and collecting stories from a few other people. That was more of the gist of it. And then after I finished writing it and did some reflection and realized, like, yeah, the stories were fun and interesting and all those experiences were great. But what I noticed was this consistency of, number one, having all these experiences with friends. First, it was my friend Terry back in high school and college, and then Patty since then for the past 40 years, 30, 40 years, and having history of time and experiences and doing these things together was it was one of the things that keeps us together. As sometimes that's the only time we see each other for years will go by, but we'll go to a Springsteen concert together.
Yeah.
And the other thing I realized was in my life, I've done a lot of different things. I've been an artist. I did film for a while. I've hosted a TV show for a couple years. I worked in corporate as a corporate trainer. I've done a lot. I have a lot of interests, but there are a few things that have remained consistent in my life. And being a Springsteen fan is one of those things. So having the honor to be able to write this book and document this consistency of being a Springsteen fan over so many years was a really good feeling for me because I beat myself up about being scattered and I'm all over the place. But in this case, I'm not. I'm solid.
You'll be a good companion on this part of the ride.
I just did two in the past
Okay.
couple weeks.
How did those go?
They went great, really
Good.
great. I had a pretty good turnout for both of them, and the community really rallied around me. And the book is available for sale in Asbury Park at there's a gift shop called the Fun House
Oh, nice.
on the boardwalk in Convention Hall, which is pretty cool.
Are there songs you're still chasing, Lori? Are there songs you haven't got to hear live that you want to hear?
Oh gosh, I would have to say not really. I have some favorites. Every time I hear Jungle Land live and the audience sings along with the chorus,
Yeah.
I still get choked up and I get goosebumps. And that song is just so epic. And yeah, so that's one of my favorites. Even still, Thunder Road. And it's just the whole like when the audience sings along to Bruce and you've got 20,000 people do there's nothing like that. That's the concert moments that even if some of the songs I don't really like that he might play.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Cadillac Ranch, Dance in the Dark, like those kind of the ones that became
Yeah.
popular songs, but those other ones, like when he plays Sandy. So yeah, yeah, no, there's not really anything I would say.
So, how do you feel about him being a little political, more political than normal?
I understand, I'm in support of it. I understand why people might not be. I understand their perspective on it. But because of my family history with the Holocaust and all that, I think we have to. Everybody that can speak out, nobody's going to listen to me, but I speak out. Yes, I think we have to speak out. And I am in full support. And he's got the ear of a lot of people. I'm in support of it.
Yeah, I'm a very lonely, my wife and I are very lonely blueberries in a very heavy strawberry field here in Texas. I tend to be a little out, I'm outspoken on social media about hypocrisy is the biggest thing that bothers me.
Yes.
I have someone who like, I want health, I want everyone to have health insurance. We disagree on how to get there. But the idea of that when our people are shot and killed, this is the worst thing ever. When your people are, we just aren't going to worry about it. I'm glad he's doing it too, and I appreciate that. I think it's important for him to speak up, and that's good. What's next for you? What's next? You talked about you've worked in TV, you've done poetry, you've helped write your grandma's story about it. What's next for you creatively, Lori?
After I go see Bruce in Milan in a couple weeks,
Yay.
I am starting to work on another book project.
Okay.
And it's about balance in
Okay.
life,
Nice.
finding balance in every single thing that I can think of. We have to find balance. And I think for me, it's been a real struggle to do that. I'm either got too many things to do or not enough things to do. I'm either eating all the right foods and not having any treats or having food, work-life balance, obviously. And then there's physical balance. As we get older, we need to have physical balance so we don't fall.
Yeah.
I think it's a topic that kind of crosses over a lot of different areas in life.
Oh, that's very fascinating. My wife and I were at a mass years ago in Louisiana. We were home visiting for some reason, and so we went to mass. And the priest, his homily was anytime you pick something, you're not picking something else.
Yes.
And I realized that intellectually, but just all of a sudden it hit. To choose good nutrition means you maybe not have as much snacks, right?
Yeah,
To sleep late may mean you don't choose to exercise or this different
right.
things. And which will lead to the Mary question in a minute, but when Jay Armstrong was first on the podcast talking about this, he says that Thunder Road is about choices. And Mary has to make that choice. Does she stay on the porch or does she get in the car? And you have to have courage to leave that porch to make that choice because you're choosing. He would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road, and they would study it as if it was a poem, discussing the different imagery and the themes that Bruce explores. And he would ask his class, do you think Mary gets in the car? So, Lori, that is your question. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
Is this a yes or no?
Nope. You
I want her to get in the car because if it was me, I'd get in the car because I'm all about adventure. Like I want to have as many adventures in my life as I can have. And I always would choose a thing that's a little bit outside my comfort zone. And to me, that's what adventure is in life. Stepping out of your comfort zone just a little bit. So I want her to go in the car. But the reason why I don't think she did is because when he says in the lyrics, I'm pulling out of here to win.
yeah,
And he doesn't say, we're pulling out of here to win. So that's the only clue that I could see that shows that maybe she didn't get in the car.
that's a good answer. I love that answer. It's about 50-50. About half people say she does, half the people say she doesn't.
It's a really great question because upon thinking about it and thinking about if I was standing there and what would I do? If you bring it into that kind of a perspective, it really teaches something about yourself. Am I willing to take a risk
Yeah.
to stepping into the unknown, stepping off the abyss, jumping off of the cliff?
Yes. A couple of my favorite answers is one guy said that she absolutely gets in the car. They drive to California. They make a life together. And Moonlight Motel is him mourning her death.
Wow.
That's pretty solid. A guy said that it depends. If it's Bruce and the whole band doing Thunder Road, she gets in the car because this triumphant ending. When it's Bruce solo, she doesn't get in the car. That's why he sings it a little sad. So I think that's great. This was so much fun, Lori. I am so happy you took some time to visit with me. Tell us where we can find the book, and if someone wants to reach you, how can they?
First, thank you so much for having me on the show. This was really fun. I love talking about Bruce and to someone else who's excited about him as I am. It's great. So there's a Facebook group called Chasing Bruce, and people can join that group and send in a story or a picture connected with Springsteen. My website is Lori Krein, LORIKREIN LoriKrein.com. And that's where you can, there's links there to all my books. So I have a whole page with all my books, and that links you to Amazon. If you search me on Amazon, you'll see all my books on Amazon. And yeah, I'm on Instagram at Chasing Bruce.
Any final thoughts before you get out of here?
I haven't yet sent a copy to Bruce of the book, but I'm planning on it because I know he's on tour in Europe. But maybe I'll bring a copy with me and be able to hand it to him in person. Yes, I have a few times.
Oh, nice.
Yes. And then when he did Broadway, Springsteen on Broadway, I
Yeah.
got him to sign a copy of this picture that I blew up and I had a whole blank page right next to it. And I waited for 2 hours in the freezing cold outside of the theater and I handed it to him and he looked at me and he looked at the picture and he said, wow, that's an old one. And then he signed it. So now I will maybe try to hand him the book if I can. But yeah.
All right, listeners, go to the website, check it out. Go to Amazon, check it out. Chasing Bruce through the Backstreets and Beyond Confessions of a Springsteen Fan. Lori, I loved the book. I will tell you a secret. I could not sleep last night. So
Yeah.
I started reading it on the Kindle last night. And at 3, I still haven't slept, but I got to hear the story. So thank you for getting me through a sleepless night.
Oh,
So thank you
you're
so
wel
much. I
you're
loved,
welcome.
loved this book.
It is coming out an audiobook in a couple months.
All right, listeners, as I said, go check it out. For now, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk soon. Goodbye.